So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's service. And it's nice to see you all today. And as some of you know, I'm doing the virtual morning services every morning. And now we have like close to 1,000 videos online, including Sunday services videos. And I have read few important texts of our traditions in the morning services. So if you are interested, please go to our YouTube channel and look for the playlist starting with reading something. So we have like a mini series starting from reading something. And while I really appreciate the efforts and hard work of the translators who translated Shinran Shonin's writings into English, I find it, it is difficult to translate some of Japanese terms into English accurately. And I really feel the need of explaining the meaning of the words in Shinran Shonin's text. And I believe this was the same in Shinran Shonin's time too. And Shinran Shonin is from 13th century. And today's words I shared at the beginning. This one, it is difficult to tell something is different from usual writings of Shinran Shonin just by reading the translation of the English. But let me quote another verses from Shoshin, which is also written by Shinran Shonin. 天神菩薩論を作りてとかく無下校如来に奇妙を仕立て祭る主たらによりて真実を表して王朝の大誓願を公宣する Bodhisattva Vasubandhu, composing a treatise, declares that he takes refuge in the Tathagata of unhindered light, and that relying on the sutras, he will reveal the true and real virtues, and make widely known the great vow by which we live crosswise beyond birth and death. So, as I highlighted, the name Vasubandhu is translated in a different way. And Shoshin was written probably when Shinran Shonin was around in his 50s. But this hymn or gatha of the two gateways of entrance and emergencies was written when Shinran Shonin was around 80 years old. So, there are several writings by Shinran Shonin which was written around or after his 80s, such as Nyu Shutsu Nimonge, hymn for gatha of the two gateways of entrance and emergence, Ichinen Tanen Mongi, notes on one's calling and many calling, Yui Shinsho Mongi, notes on essentials of faith alone, Songo Shinzo Meimon, notes on inscriptions on the sacred scrolls, and Midanyorai Myogotoku, the virtues of the name of Amida Tathagata. And, Shinran Shonin also wrote many letters. And all these writings use the name Sesshin instead of Tenjin. So why is it, right? And there are several copies of hymn for gatha of two gateways of entrance and emergence. And one copy by the disciple of Shinran Shonin named Shinbutsu have some words before the verses I shared at the beginning today. And it said, I hope I have it, okay. On the treatise on the Sutra of Immeasurable Life, one fascicle, translated by the Indian Tripitaka master Bodhiruchi during the Wei dynasty. This treatise by Bodhisattva Vasubandhu, or Pasapantu, is a transliteration of a Sanskrit. In old translations, his name was translated Tianqin, or Tenjin, which is inaccurate. In later translations, it is given as Shichin, Sesshin, which is correct. The Upadesha in the Gatha of Aspiration for Birth has been named Treatise on the Pure Land by Master Chant. This treatise is also called the Treatise on Birth. The two gateways of entrance and emergence come from this work. So, since this note is only on Shinbutsu's copy, we are not sure if this was in original Shinran Shonin's writings or not. But since the name Sesshin appears in these writings, it is certain that Shinran Shonin started to use the name Sesshin for Bodhisattva Vasubandhu around he was 80 years old. And the translation, Tenjin, was often used before one of the Tripitaka masters and the great translators named Shuan-san, or Genjo Sanzo. And Shuan-san felt the lack of the accurate translation on one of the Mahayana philosophy called Yogacara. And he broke the law of the country, and he traveled to India, studied in India, and came back to China after 16 years. And the travel to India from China was not so easy back then. As we see in the story, I don't know if you know the story, A Journey to the West. Do you know that, Journey to the West? Or Saiyuki in Japanese. If you know Dragon Ball, the animation, the main character's name, Son Goku, comes from this Journey to the West. And it talks about Monkey King and Tripitaka Master Shuan-san's travel to China from India. But that is a fiction, but it is based on journal of Shuan-san's travel to West and travel to India. And his travel was travel, risking his life or one's life. And Shuan-san risked his life to travel to India. Why? Because he wanted to bring back the authentic Buddhism from India to China. And the history of translation of the Sanskrit, right, Sanskrit, and Pali text into Chinese has a long history. At first, there were no words to translate Buddhist ideas into Chinese. So many translators used the idea from Confucianism or Taoism. This is similar to the translation of Buddhist texts into English. When I read like a BCA minister's book from 1920s or 1930s or so, they often use the Christian terms to translate the Buddhist terms, such as, now we call it like a compassion, but oftentimes back then they used the love and mercy of Amida Buddha or love and mercy of Shakyamuni Buddha or something like that. And they often use the word salvation and so on. But later on, going back to the Chinese translation, but translation in China experienced changed several times. And one translator who influenced Chinese translation is Kumarajiva from 4th century. He translated many sutras, including Amida Sutra we chant. Okay, Amida Sutra we chant. We chant Amida Sutra last week. Do you remember? Right? So we chant Amida Sutra, and we only chant 1/3 of it, right? And also, Kumarajiva translated the Lotus Sutra, which Nichiren school and Tendai school treasures, and some writings of Bodhisattva Nagarjuna. So Kumarajiva's translation is beautiful translation in terms of having good balance on the translation and accurate meanings. Then Shuan-san, he changed the history of translation again. He brought back so many sutras and commentaries from India, and it is said that he could finish the translation 1/3 of the text he brought back from India. So, the Great Wisdom Sutra, Daihanyakyo. This is translated by Shuan-san. Can you guess how many characters in the Great Wisdom Sutra? No guess? No guess? So it is about 4,800,000 characters and 600 volumes. 600. And we think that Amida Sutra is long, right? But do you see the 4 scrolls in front of the table of Amida Buddha? Far left is Amida Sutra, and Contemplation Sutra, and 2 volumes of the Raja Sutra. That is scrolls in there. You see it, right? So, we think Amida Sutra is long, but the Contemplation Sutra is longer, and the Raja Sutra is much longer. But even the largest sutra has 2 volumes. So 600 volumes. That is a lot of characters to chant, right? So, some of the schools who rely on or who studies or who chant Daihanyakyo, the Great Wisdom Sutra, they don't chant whole thing. They chant part of it. And, I have this kind of accordion type of the sutra book, right? So they don't chant whole thing. They chant part of it and they do. I'm not good at it, so I can't do it well. But, if they do it this, they chant it once. If they do this, they chant twice. So, if they say like we chanted 100 times of the Great Wisdom Sutra, that means they were doing this while chanting the sutra. So 600 volumes, that's really long, so they cannot chant a whole thing, right? So, Shanzan changed the translation of the name of Vasubandhu from Tenjin to Seshin. And Bodhisattva Vasubandhu is from 5th century. And another Tripitaka master called Paramartha, who is a translator about 100 years before Shanzan, translated a lot of Bodhisattva Vasubandhu's text into Chinese using the name Tenjin. So probably Shanzan wanted to correct the translation of Paramartha. And actually, many of Bodhisattva Vasubandhu's texts have Paramartha's translation and Shanzan's translation. So, we might see some changes of English translation in the futures too. But, it took few hundred years and many geniuses to come up with the Chinese translation. So we might need time, or maybe more a linguistic genius, and maybe our Dharma school students become really genius and translate Shinran Shongin's works into English, and it's going to be like a standard of the translation one day. So I am talking about the translation today. That is because I really feel the need of the translation of many great texts in Japan regarding Jodo Shinshu teaching. If we go to the Powell bookstore, we can find a bunch of books of Zen Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. But we only see tiny section of Jodo Shinshu. Or, even worse, there is no section of Jodo Shinshu in bookstore, right? But Jodo Shinshu is one of the biggest schools in Japan and earliest Buddhist schools who came into the United States. But now, Zen Tibetan is more popular compared to Jodo Shinshu teaching, right? And I believe that is because Zen is more experiential compared to Jodo Shinshu, right? They call it shikan taza, just sit, right? Just sit. That's really easy teaching to understand. But Jodo Shinshu teachings, we don't require anything from our side to attain Buddhahood, but we need to listen to the teaching, right? We need to accept the origin and the fulfillment of the primal vow of Amida Buddha. So this is one thing which made Jodo Shinshu difficult to spread in Western countries. Because we Japanese did not speak English, and as I mentioned earlier, it is difficult to translate some of the terms into English, right? But I feel that is why we need more translations and explain more about the teachings. Because I want more people in the world to encounter the teaching of Nembutsu, teaching of Jodo Shinshu. I still remember when I was an international ministerial orientation program student, I visited Orange County Buddhist Church in California, Anaheim. Harada Sensei, he is now bishop of BCA, but he was still the resident minister of OCBC back then. And at the OCBC office, I was reading a book by Reverend Daiei Kaneko. He is one of the great scholars of Otani-ha school. And and I was reading his book in Japanese while waiting for Harada Sensei to finish his business. Then Harada Sensei came to me and asked me what I am reading. Then I said, I am reading Kaneko Daie's book, and gosh, it's so difficult. Then Harada Sensei said, well, still, you are able to read it, right? I didn't think about how fortunate I am to be able to read the text in Japanese, right? But I felt this is one of the feelings Nembutsu followers in Western countries feeling. You are lucky you are able to read Japanese text, right? So now, the virtual morning services I conduct and reading text in English, there are this is a list of the videos we have. And I rely heavily on the books written by the great scholars of Jodo Shinshu to explain these texts. And my talk is not the full translation of their books, but most of the ideas comes from their books. And hopefully these videos help those who have no Jodo Shinshu temples around or any resources regarding Jodo Shinshu. But watching so many videos are difficult sometimes. I say, as I mentioned, we have like close to 1,000 videos. It takes 1,000 days to finish watching if you watch one videos per day, right? And it's not like a Netflix exciting drama or something. You don't watch the whole series in one day, right? But I'm glad that we have viewers from all over the country, though. We have viewers from Romania, England, and China, and Japan, and so, many other countries. So my hope is that I have time to edit my script into book, and then we have it available for people to read it. Reading book is much easier compared to watching the videos, right? And almost every video begins with the chanting of Shoshin. So it takes about 15 minutes, right? So, you don't want to wait for finishing the chanting too. So now I am working on editing the reading Letters of Rennyo, because it is one of the shortest series I did. It only has like 30 videos. And I thought it would be easy to edit it. But it's taking so much time to edit it. So I hope I can finish it by this year, finish editing the reading Letters of Rennyo series. But, by doing this kind of work, I began to feel more appreciation towards translators from the past, and, such as Kumarajiva, Shantsan, and masters of India, China, and Japan. I am now able to hear the teaching of Nembutsu, guided by these translators and masters and predecessors, right? And in Japanese, we often express this kind of feeling as osodate ni azukaru, receiving the working to nurture us, right? Through their guidance, I am nurtured to be the person of Shinjin and Nembutsu. So I really feel great appreciation towards the translators and our predecessors. And I really feel fortunate that I was able to encounter this teaching of Nembutsu. So, when we chant Amida Sutra next time, please don't think that when this chanting is going to be end, right? But think about the efforts of Kumarajiva translating some Sanskrit text into Chinese. And now we are being able to chant that sutra translated in 4th century in 21st century United States, right? So please think about their efforts and appreciate their efforts too. So I would like to conclude my talk with Gassho and Nembutsu. So please join me in Gassho. Please put your palms together. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namanda Butsu. Namanda.